Forget everything Hollywood taught you about the mob, those fancy suits and dramatic speeches, pure fiction. The real Cosa Nostra operated like a paranoid corporation run by psychopaths with rulebooks thicker than the Bible. These weren't suggestions. They were blood oaths. Break one, and your own brother would be ordered to put a bullet in your skull while your mother cooked Sunday dinner upstairs. Today, I'm revealing the 50 commandments that turned ordinary criminals into terrified soldiers. From banned handshakes to forbidden foods, these rules proved the Mafia wasn't about freedom. It was about control. Total, absolute, suffocating control. Let's begin. Commandment 1. The blood oath is permanent. The moment you prick your finger and burn that holy card, you sign away your soul forever. This isn't a job interview. There's no resignation letter, no 2 weeks notice, no career change. You belong to the family until they bury you, and they usually bury you sooner than later. Every made man understood this truth on initiation day. The oath translates roughly to I enter alive and I exit dead. Romantic, isn't it? Commandment 2. Silence is survival. Murder wasn't just a fancy Italian word they threw around in movies. It was oxygen. You breathe it or you die. This code of absolute silence meant you never, under any circumstances, spoke to police, prosecutors, journalists, or even your own priest about family business. Men rotted in prison for decades rather than speak a single word. Why? Because snitchies didn't just die. Their mothers died. Their children died. Their entire bloodline got erased from existence. Commandment 3. Your wife and your girlfriend never meet. Every made man was expected to have a wife at home and a mistress on the side. But these two worlds could never collide. The wife represented respectability, church on Sundays, family dinners. The girlfriend represented the street life, the nightclubs, the real business. Mixing them wasn't just embarrassing. It was considered a sign of weakness, poor judgment, and grounds for losing your position. Managing this double life was basically a job requirement. Commandment 4. Never touch a made man. As a soldier receives his button, he becomes untouchable to anyone below him. It doesn't matter if he insults your dead father. It doesn't matter if he sleeps with your sister. It doesn't matter if he owes you a fortune. You cannot raise a hand against him without permission from above. Doing so meant automatic execution. No trial, no appeal, no mercy. This rule kept the hierarchy intact and prevented the organization from eating itself alive. Commandment 5. Shorts are for civilians. This sounds absolutely ridiculous, but old-school bosses strictly forbade made men from wearing shorts in public. The reasoning? A man of respect must maintain dignity at all times. Bare knees were considered childish, weak, and unbecoming of a professional criminal. When Tony Soprano wore shorts on television, actual mobsters complained that it made them look foolish. Imagine being a killer afraid of khaki shorts. Commandment 6. Your blood cannot wear a badge. If anyone in your family tree ever worked as a police officer, your Mafia application gets rejected immediately. Father, uncle, distant cousin, it doesn't matter. Cop blood is contaminated blood in their eyes. The paranoia about undercover infiltration ran so deep that they would investigate 3 generations back. Before considering you. One relative with a badge meant lifetime exclusion from the family. Commandment 7. Check your car before starting it. Car bombs became such a popular assassination method that wise guys developed permanent paranoia about their own vehicles. Before turning the key, you checked under the hood, inside the wheel wells, beneath the chassis, every single time. This wasn't excessive caution. This was survival. Men who forgot this habit ended up scattered across 3 city blocks. Commandment 8. The boss eats first. Kick-up system required every earner to pass a percentage of their illegal income up the chain. Your capo took his cut, then passed a portion to the underboss, who passed a portion to the boss. It didn't matter if you had a terrible month or if the cops seized your gambling operation. The envelope better be full, or your name goes on a different kind of list. This pyramid scheme kept the leadership rich while soldiers took all the actual risks. Commandment 9. Never lie to your own. Here's the irony. Professional criminals who lied for a living were forbidden from lying to each other. You could deceive the government, cheat civilians, and manipulate anyone outside the family. But lying to a fellow member was considered treason, punishable by death. The organization depended on accurate information to survive wars and investigations. Internal dishonesty could destroy everything they built. Commandment 10. Paper is poison. Writing down names, debts, or criminal activities was strictly forbidden. Paper trails are how prosecutors build RICO cases. Paper trails are how entire families end up in federal prison. Everything had to be memorized. Loan amounts, payment schedules, drug weights, all kept exclusively in your head. If you couldn't Remember numbers, you had no business being in the business. Commandment 11. Another man's wife is off limits while cheating on your own wife was practically expected. Touching another made man's wife meant immediate execution. This had nothing to do with morality. It was about respect and property. Sleeping with a colleague's spouse was considered the ultimate insult, a declaration of war against him personally. Paul Castellano, boss of the Gambino family, was partly murdered because people believed he was too soft on this rule. Commandment 12. Sunday belongs to God and family. No matter what horrors occurred during the week, Sunday was sacred. Church in the morning, family dinner in the afternoon, no business whatsoever. This ritual allowed made men to compartmentalize their brutal professional lives from their domestic existence. You could order a murder on Friday and pass the meatballs on Sunday like a loving father. The psychological separation kept them functional. Commandment 13. Kidnapping brings too much heat. After the Lindbergh baby case turned kidnapping into a federal offense, the commission banned it entirely, not because they developed morals overnight, but because the FBI came down too hard on kidnappers. The heat wasn't worth the ransom money. This is one of the few instances where the mob drew a line purely for business survival rather than ethical reasons. Commandment 14. Never rob your own neighborhood. Smart gangsters understood that local goodwill was valuable protection. You didn't steal from neighbors. Instead, you overtipped waitresses, paid full price at local shops, and acted like a generous community member. Why? Because if the neighborhood loved you, they wouldn't call cops when they noticed suspicious activity. Be a villain everywhere else, but be a hero on your own block. Commandment 15. Italian blood. Online for decades, full Italian heritage was mandatory for membership. If your father was Irish or your mother was German, you could never become a made man regardless of your criminal accomplishments. This is why Henry Hill and Jimmy Burke from Goodfellas could never be fully initiated despite their value to the organization. The discrimination was absolute and non-negotiable. Commandment 16. Disputes go to sit-downs. Physical fighting between members was forbidden. If you had a problem with another wise guy, you requested a sit-down with your respective capos. These meetings functioned like court hearings where bosses listened to both sides and issued a binding verdict. Arguing with the decision could get you killed. It was bureaucracy enforced with bullets. Commandment 17. The family supports your family. When a made man went to prison, the organization was obligated to financially support his wife and children. This was the social contract. You keep quiet, they keep your family fed. However, this rule was frequently broken in later years, leading many bitter inmates to cooperate with prosecutors. Loyalty evaporates quickly when rent checks stop arriving. Commandment 18. Hide your wealth. Flashing expensive purchases without reporting a big score raised immediate suspicion. If a low-level soldier suddenly appeared with a new Cadillac and gold jewelry, his bosses assumed he was holding out on kick-ups. Every dollar you spent was scrutinized by the people above you. The safest approach was living modestly even when you earn fortunes. Commandment 19. There is no retirement. You cannot quit the Mafia. The oath is lifetime. Men who tried to walk away were usually walked into shallow graves instead. There's no pension plan, no farewell party, no Florida retirement. The only exits are prison, witness protection, or death. Most got the third option. Commandment 20. Maintain a legitimate cover. Every made man needed a no-show job to explain his income to the IRS. The mob infiltrated unions and legitimate businesses specifically to provide W-2 forms for their members. You show up occasionally, collect a paycheck, and claim to be a construction consultant or waste management supervisor. It was hiding in plain sight while running criminal walk when you talk, because the FBI became experts at planting listening devices in restaurants, social clubs, and homes. Wise guys conducted sensitive conversations while walking outdoors. They would pace around blocks for hours, letting traffic noise mask their words. It looked paranoid and ridiculous, but it was the only way to avoid federal wiretaps recording their conspiracies. Commandment 22. Bust out every partnership. When mobsters became business partners with civilians, they typically executed a bust-out scheme. They would order massive inventory on the store's credit, sell everything out the back door for cash, max out every credit line, then burn the building for insurance money. It was systematic financial destruction disguised as partnership. Commandment 23. Crazy is illegal. Strategivance. The Chin Gigante wandered New York City in a bathrobe and slippers for 30 years, mumbling to himself and appearing mentally incompetent. It was an elaborate act to convince courts he was unfit for trial. Meanwhile, he ran one of the most powerful crime families in America. The performance was Oscar-worthy and incredibly effective. Commandment 24, control the garbage. Waste management industry was perfect for mob control. Every business needs trash removal. It generates steady cash, and garbage trucks can hide almost anything. Plus, if a business owner refused to pay protection, you simply stopped collecting his garbage during summer. The stench convinced most holdouts to pay within days. Commandment 25. Social clubs are fortresses. Storefront social clubs with blacked-out windows weren't for playing cards. They were headquarters for criminal operations, meeting spaces for planning, and courtrooms for settling disputes. However, having a permanent address made surveillance easy for the FBI. Many families eventually got taken down because they couldn't stay away from their favorite hangouts. Commandment 26. Purple means death in traditional Italian superstition. Purple represents mourning and funerals. Many old-school mobsters refuse to wear purple, drive purple cars, or have purple decorations in their homes. It sounds absurd, but when your daily life involves dodging assassination attempts, you start taking every possible omen seriously. Commandment 27. Respect your elders, or DH commanded absolute respect in mob hierarchy. You stood when senior members entered the room. You held doors, offered seats, and showed deference at all times. This wasn't about manners. It was about maintaining strict organizational structure. Disrespecting an elder was considered disrespecting the entire institution. Commandment 28. Gambling creates slaves. Running illegal casinos wasn't just about profit. It was about creating debt traps for wealthy professionals. When a doctor or lawyer lost big at the card table, he became property of the family. Now he owed favors, free medical care, legal representation, expert testimony. Gambling debt turned civilians into unpaid consultants. Commandment 29. Never touch the boss unless the boss explicitly invites physical contact. You keep your distance. No handshakes, no pats on the back, no friendly embraces. This rule reinforced his elevated status, creating an aura of untouchable power around the leader. He existed on a different plane than ordinary soldiers. Commandment 30. Introductions are life or death. You never introduce yourself in mob circles. A trusted third party must vouch for you. The specific language matters enormously. A friend of mine means you're a civilian associate. A friend of ours means you're a fully initiated made man. FBI agent Joseph Peastone waited years undercover just to hear those crucial words. Getting the phrase wrong could expose an undercover operation or get an innocent person killed. Commandment 31. Fear the IRS more than the FBI. Al Capone taught every future gangster an important lesson. Murder charges require witnesses who can be intimidated or eliminated. Tax evasion charges require only paperwork. Mobsters actually filed tax returns declaring vague income from consulting or miscellaneous sources. They feared accountants more than federal agents. Commandment 32. Never speak the boss's name. Mind the Genovese family. Saying Vincent Giganti's name aloud was strictly forbidden. Instead, members touched their chin to reference him. This counter-surveillance measure ensured FBI wiretaps never captured the boss's name connected to criminal discussions. It was paranoid, effective, and created his famous nickname, the Chin. Commandment 33. Hold your liquor or lose your life. Drinking was acceptable. Getting sloppy drunk was a death sentence. Intoxicated men talk too much, reveal secrets, and make dangerous mistakes. If you couldn't maintain composure while drinking, you became a liability the family couldn't afford. Many loose-lipped drunks simply disappeared. Commandment 34. Vacation requires permission. Made men couldn't travel without approval from their superiors. The family needed to know your location at all times in case war erupted or a specific job required your participation. Booking a flight to visit relatives meant asking your capo first, like a teenager asking parents for permission. Commandment 35. The Commission rules everything. Lucky Luciano created the Commission in the 1930s as a governing body for organized crime. The heads of the 5 New York families met to vote on major decisions, settle territorial disputes, and authorize significant hits. It transformed chaotic street gangs into a structured national organization with actual corporate dispose of the weapon immediately after a hit. The murder weapon had to disappear instantly, drop it at the scene, throw it in a river, melt it down. Keeping a gun linked to a body was rookie stupidity that sent men to the electric chair. Firearms were treated as disposable tools, used once and discarded forever. Commandment 37. Civilians are bad for business. Killing regular people, especially journalists or public figures, brought devastating law enforcement attention. When gangsters killed each other, police investigated casually. When innocent civilians died, the entire city cracked down. It was cold calculation rather than mercy. Dead innocents disrupted the money flow. Commandment 38. By the jury he risk a trial when you can purchase the verdict. Jury tampering was a standard mob tactic for decades. Find a juror, threaten their family, or offer substantial cash, and guarantee a hung jury or acquittal. It created a sense of courtroom invincibility that lasted until federal prosecution methods evolved. Commandment 39. Wash your money. Millions in cash from illegal operations couldn't be spent without laundering. This created the need for cash-heavy legitimate businesses like pizzerias, laundromats, and vending machine companies where receipts are easy to fabricate. Dirty money mixed with legitimate income becomes clean and spendable. Sometimes paying taxes is the goal. Commandment 40. Always come armed. Even friendly meetings required carrying a weapon. The come heavy rule meant never attending any sit-down unarmed, regardless of who called it. Trust was essentially non-existent. A pleasant conversation could become an execution in seconds, and the only survivors were those prepared for betrayal. Commandment 41. Carry a backup gun. Professional hitmen carried to weapons minimum. If your primary pistol jams during a hit, you become the victim instead of the killer. Mechanical failure means death. The backup gun wasn't optional. It was mandatory professional equipment. Like a surgeon carrying spare scalpels. Commandment 42. Your son earns his own way. Bosses couldn't simply hand their sons made man status as birthday gifts. The next generation had to earn respect from the bottom up like everyone else. Many bosses, including Carlo Gambino, actually pushed their children toward legitimate businesses, understanding that the criminal life usually ended badly. Commandment 43. Divorce before prison. Men facing long prison sentences were often encouraged to divorce their wives before incarceration. This wasn't cruelty, it was protection. It freed her from FBI harassment and prevented her from becoming a financial burden on the organization for decades. A twisted form of love expressed through legal separation. Commandment 44. Phones are government. Microphone is dissing business over telephone lines was absolutely forbidden. Wiretaps were the FBI's favorite weapon, and they listened to everything. Wise guys spoke in codes so vague they sometimes confused each other. Meet me at the place about the thing with the guy. If you couldn't say it directly to a jury, you couldn't say it into a phone. Commandment 45. Loan shark. Interest never stops burrowing from a mob. Loan shark meant entering a mathematical trap. The weekly interest vigorous accumulated even after you repaid the principal. Miss a few payments and you might owe 10 times the original loan. It was designed to create permanent debtors rather than satisfied customers. Commandment 46. Someone must take the fall. Large legal operations always had a designated fall guy whose job was accepting a rest if police raided. This sacrificial employee was paid handsomely and his family was supported, but his career path literally included prison time. He existed to protect the bosses above him. Commandment 47. Nitrogen monoxide. Beards a la Wet Bee and the famous mustache ban. Full beards were also prohibited. They obscured your face, made you look untrustworthy, and projected a street thug image rather than respectable businessman. Even during the 1970s when beards were fashionable everywhere, wise guys remained clean-shaven like 1950s executives. Commandment 48. Bodies go in trunks. When disposal was complicated, bodies often ended up in car trunks, left at airport long-term parking lots. By the time the smell alerted security, the killer had an alibi or had left the country. This became such common practice that New York detectives routinely checked JFK airport parking lots first when mobsters disappeared. Commandment 49. There is nitrogen monoxide. Exists bears repeating as the second to last commandment because it defines the entire existence of made men. No retirement, no resignation, no escape. Old men clung to power desperately because losing status meant losing life. The organization was a prison disguised as a family. The final verdict before we reach number 50. Let me ask you something. Which rule terrified you most? Personally, I think the purple superstition wins for sheer absurdity. Imagine a cold-blooded killer trembling because someone brought violet flowers to his daughter's birthday party. Let me know in the comments. Which commandment would have broken you first? Commandment 50. The boss has got this is the ultimate rule that encompasses everything else. The boss is always right, even when he is objectively, verifiably, catastrophically wrong. If he says the sky is green, you agree enthusiastically and ask what shade. Total obedience without question. Total surrender of logic, morality, and free will. If the boss orders you to kill your childhood best friend, you do it with a smile. If he tells you to destroy your own family, you ask how thoroughly. This single commandment explains why the Mafia survived for a century, not through intelligence or strategy, but through absolute, terrifying, unquestioning submission to power.